Hey, how Hollands, Mr. Swetckie. It is Thursday the 2nd, and we are going to continue our story time with Stuart Little for my K-2 students. So hopefully you are curled up in front of your Chromebook with a warm blanket, maybe a stuffed animal, and a cup of cocoa. And we're going to cover two chapters today because they're kind of short. So this is once again Stuart Little by E.B. White, and we are going to read chapter 3 and chapter 4 today. So here we go. Chapter 3, Washing Up. Stuart was an early riser. He was almost always the first person up in the morning. He liked the feeling of being the first one stirring. He enjoyed the quiet rooms with the books standing still on the shelves, the pale light coming in through the windows, and the fresh smell of the day. In wintertime, it would be quite dark when he climbed from his bed made out of the little box, and he sometimes shivered with cold as he stood in his nightgown doing his exercises. Stuart touched his toes 10 times every morning to keep himself in good condition. He had seen his brother George do it, and George had explained that it kept the stomach muscles firm, and that was a fine abdominal thing to do. After exercising, Stuart would slip on his handsome wool wrapper, tie the cord tightly around his waist, and start for the bathroom, creeping silently through the long, dark hall past his mother and father's room, past the hall closet where the carpet sweeper was kept, past George's room, and along by the head of the stairs till he got to the bathroom. Of course, the bathroom would be dark too, but Stuart's father had thoughtfully tied a long string to the pull chain of the light. The string reached clear to the floor. By grasping it as high as he could and throwing his whole weight on it, Stuart was able to turn on the light. Swinging on the string this way with a long bathrobe trailing around his ankles, he looked a lot like a little old friar pulling the bell rope in an abbey. To get to the wash basin, Stuart had to climb a tiny rope ladder which his father had fixed for him. George had promised to build Stuart a small special wash basin, only 1 inch high with a little rubber tube through which water could flow. But George was always saying that he was going to build something and then forgetting about it. Stuart just went ahead and climbed the rope ladder to the family wash basin every morning to wash his face and hands and brush his teeth. Mrs. Little had provided him a doll-sized toothbrush, a doll-sized cake of soap, a doll-sized washcloth, and a doll's comb, which he used for combing his whiskers. He carried these things in his bathrobe pocket, and when he reached the top of the ladder, he took them out, laid them neatly in a row, and set about the task of turning the water on. For such a small fellow, turning the water on was quite a problem. He had discussed it with his father one day after making several unsuccessful attempts. "I can get up onto the faucet all right," he explained, "but I can't seem to turn it on because I have nothing to brace my feet against." "Yes, I know," his father replied. "That's the whole trouble." George, who always listened to conversations whenever he could, said that in his opinion, they ought to construct a brace for Stuart. And with that, he got out some boards, a saw, a hammer, a screwdriver, a brad awl, and some nails, and started to make a terrific fuss in the bathroom, building what he said was going to be a brace for Stuart. But he soon became interested in something else and disappeared, leaving the tools lying around all over the bathroom floor. Stuart, after examining this mess, turned to his father again. "Maybe I could pound the faucet with something that would turn it that way," he said. So Stuart's father provided him with a very small, light hammer made of wood, and Stuart found that by swinging it 3 times around his head and letting it come down with a crash against the handle of the faucet, he could start a thin stream of water flowing, enough to brush his teeth in anyway, and moisten his washcloth. So every morning after climbing to the basin, he would seize the hammer and pound the faucet. And the other members of the household, dozing in their beds, would hear a bright, sharp clink, clink, clink of Stuart's hammer like a faraway blacksmith telling them that the day had come and that Stuart was trying to brush his teeth. Chapter 4, Exercise. One fine morning in the month of May, when Stuart was 3 years old, he arose early as was his custom, washed and dressed himself, and took his hat and cane and went downstairs into the living room to see what was doing. Nobody was around but Snowbell, the white cat belonging to Mrs. Little. Snowbell was another early riser, and this morning he was lying on the rug in the middle of the room, thinking about the days when he was just a kitten. "Good morning," said Stuart. "Hello," replied Snowbell sharply. "You're up early, aren't you?" Stuart looked at his watch. "Yes," he said. "It's only 5 minutes past 6, but I felt good and I thought I'd come down and get a little exercise." I should think you'd get all the exercise you want up there in the bathroom, banging around, waking all the rest of us up, trying to get the water started so you can brush your teeth. Your teeth aren't really big enough to brush anyways. Want to see a good set? Look at mine. Snowbell opened his mouth and showed 2 rows of gleaming white sharp teeth that were sharp as needles. Very nice, said Stuart, but mine are all right too, even though they're small. As for exercise, I take all I can get. I bet my stomach muscles are firmer than yours. I bet they're not, said the cat. I bet they are, said Stuart. They're like iron bands. I bet they're not, said the cat. Stuart glanced around the room to see what he could do to prove to Snowbell that what good stomach muscles he had. He spied the drawn window shade on the east window with its shade cord and ring like a trapeze, and it gave him an idea. Climbing to the windowsill, he took off his hat and laid down his cane. You can't do this, he said to the cat, and he ran and jumped onto the ring the way acrobats do in a circus, meaning to pull himself up. A surprising thing happened. Stuart had taken such a hard jump that it started the shade. With a loud snap, the shade flew up clear to the top of the window, dragging Stuart along with it and rolling him up inside so that he couldn't budge. Holy mackerel, said Snowbell, who was almost as surprised as Stuart Little. I guess that will teach him to show off his muscles. Help, let me out, cried Stuart, who was frightened and bruised inside the rolled up shade and who could hardly breathe. But his voice was so weak that nobody heard. Snowbell just chuckled. He was not fond of Stuart. It did not bother him at all that Stuart was wrapped up in a window shade, crying and hurt and unable to get out. Instead of running upstairs and telling Mr. and Mrs. Little about the accident, Snowbell did a very curious thing. He glanced around to see if anybody was looking, then he leapt softly to the windowsill, picked up Stuart's hat and cane in his mouth, and carried them to the pantry and laid them down at the entrance to the mouse hole. When Mrs. Little came down later and found them there, she gave a shrill scream which brought everybody on the run. It's happened, she cried. What has? Asked her husband. Stuart is down the mouse hole. And that concludes our story time for today, kindergarten, first, and second graders. I appreciate you tuning in. I've been told that the cool thing for principals to say is please subscribe so you know when my videos come live, and to make sure you like this video if you enjoyed story time. And we will be back tomorrow morning at 8:10 with the morning news. Even though tomorrow is a work day, you're not going to get any assignments from your teachers. I will still do the morning news for you. Wish happy birthdays for tomorrow and for the weekend, and we'll continue reading Stuart Little. So I hope you have a great afternoon. I'll be reading Harry Potter at 2:30, and I look forward to seeing you all soon. Stay healthy.